Rain hammered against the concrete as Natalie Harper sprinted through the underground parking garage, her ballet flats slapping against puddles that reflected the flickering fluorescent lights above. Her phone clutched in trembling hands, she frantically searched for her car among the rows of vehicles. Behind her, heavy footsteps echoed through the cavernous space, growing closer with each passing second. "Natalie! Stop running from me!" Tyler Brooks's voice bounced off the walls, distorted by anger and something darker, something that made her blood run cold. She rounded a corner, her breath coming in ragged gasps, lungs burning from the combination of fear and exertion. 3 months since she'd left him. 3 months of looking over her shoulder. And tonight, he'd found her leaving her evening shift at the restaurant. The restraining order felt worthless now. Just paper that couldn't stop a man consumed by obsession. Tyler's shadow stretched across the wall as he emerged behind her, his bulk blocking the exit ramp. His face, once familiar and even handsome, now twisted with rage and entitlement. Rain dripped from his leather jacket, and his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides like he was already imagining them around her throat. "You think you can just disappear?" he snarled, advancing slowly, savoring her trapped position. "You think that piece of paper means anything?" "You're mine, Natalie." "You'll always be mine." Natalie backed against a concrete pillar, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. Her fingers tightened around her keys, preparing to use them as the only weapon she had. This was it. No one else was here. No security guard making rounds. Just her and the man who'd turned love into a prison. "Stay back, Tyler," she managed, her voice stronger than she felt. "I mean it. One more step and I'll scream." His laugh was ugly, mean. "Scream all you want. Nobody's coming to save you this time." But he was wrong. The man in the Stormer car engine purred through the garage, smooth and powerful, cutting through the tension like a blade. Headlights swept across them, momentarily blinding Tyler. A sleek black sedan rolled to a stop 15 feet away, its presence commanding despite the silence. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out with the kind of confidence that required no announcement. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Natalie's monthly rent, perfectly tailored despite the late hour. His dark hair was styled back, revealing sharp features and eyes the color of storm clouds. Everything about him radiated control and danger wrapped in expensive fabric. "The lady asked you to step back," the man said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made Tyler hesitate. "I suggest you listen." Tyler turned, sizing up this new player in his twisted game. "This doesn't concern you, rich boy. Walk away." The stranger's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Something that made Tyler's bravado falter. He moved forward with measured steps, each one deliberate, until he stood between Natalie and her ex-boyfriend. Up close, she could see the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands hung relaxed at his sides despite the clear threat before them. "Julian Westmore," he introduced himself without looking back at her, his attention fixed on Tyler. "And this absolutely concerns me now that I've witnessed assault and harassment." Tyler scoffed, though his voice held less certainty. "I didn't touch her, yet," Julian said softly. The intention was clear. "Now you have 2 choices. Walk away and never approach Miss Harper again, or explain your actions to the police I'm about to call." As if to emphasize his point, Julian withdrew a phone from his pocket with casual grace. The device looked small in his hand, but the threat it represented loomed large. Tyler's face reddened, anger warring with self-preservation. He glared at Natalie, his eyes promising this wasn't over, before turning and stalking toward the exit ramp. Only when Tyler's footsteps faded completely did Julian turn to face Natalie. His expression softened slightly, concern replacing the ice. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Now that the danger had passed, her legs felt weak, trembling beneath her. Julian noticed immediately, his hand reaching out to steady her elbow with surprising gentleness. "Come, my car is warm and dry. We should move before he decides to return with reinforcements or worse judgment." Into the storm, Natalie found herself guided to the passenger seat of the sedan. The leather interior smelling of expensive cologne and new car. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing her in warmth and safety. Julian slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and smoothly exited the garage without another word. The rain had intensified, turning the city streets into rivers of reflected neon. Natalie watched the familiar buildings blur past, her mind still racing. Who was Julian Westmore? How had he appeared at exactly the right moment? And where were they going? Your apartment isn't safe, Julian said, as if reading her thoughts. His eyes remained on the road, focused and alert. Tyler knows where you live. He'll go there next, either to wait or to make his presence known. You need somewhere he can't find you. I don't have anywhere, Natalie whispered, the reality of her situation crashing down. Her small studio apartment, her few friends who couldn't risk getting involved with Tyler's violence, her barely minimum wage job. She had nothing. She was nothing in this moment. You do now, Julian replied, taking a turn that led away from her neighborhood and toward the affluent hills overlooking the city. I have a proposition for you, Natalie Harper, one that will keep you safe from men like Tyler Brooks permanently. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm as they climbed higher, the city falling away below them. Massive houses appeared behind iron gates, each one more impressive than the last. Finally, Julian turned through a private entrance, the gates opening automatically before them. The estate that appeared through the rain took Natalie's breath away. Modern architecture blended with classical elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows glowing with warm light, manicured gardens even the storm couldn't diminish. This wasn't just wealth. This was power made manifest in stone and glass. Julian parked under a covered entrance and came around to open her door, offering his hand. She took it, stepping out onto marble that probably cost more per square foot than her entire security deposit. A woman in professional attire waited at the entrance, her expression neutral but curious. "Rachel, please prepare the guest suite," Julian instructed. "Miss Harper will be staying with us." "Of course." "Sir?" Rachel replied with a slight nod before disappearing inside. Julian led Natalie through halls adorned with artwork she recognized from textbooks and magazines. Everything screamed taste and fortune beyond her imagination. They ended up in a study lined with leather-bound books, dominated by a desk that looked like it had witnessed empire-building decisions. He gestured to a chair upholstered in burgundy velvet. "Please sit. You've been through enough tonight. You deserve comfort." She sank into the chair, the softness almost overwhelming after the hard edges of the parking garage. Julian poured amber liquid into crystal glasses, offering her one before taking his own seat across from her. He didn't drink immediately, instead studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "I'm going to be direct because I respect you too much to waste your time with games," he began, his voice measured. "Tyler Brooks is a problem that won't disappear with restraining orders or hope. Men like him escalate. Tonight was a preview of what's coming unless someone with resources intervenes." Natalie's hands tightened around the glass. "I can't afford protection. I work 2 jobs just to make rent." "I'm not asking for money," Julian said, leaning forward slightly. "I'm offering you complete protection, security that Tyler can't penetrate, resources to rebuild your life however you choose. In exchange, I need something from you, something unusual but I believe mutually beneficial." Her stomach tightened with apprehension. Nothing came free, especially not from billionaires who rescued strangers in parking garages. "What do you want?" Julian's expression remained neutral, but intensity burned in his eyes. "I need an heir, a child to secure my legacy and satisfy certain business requirements. In return, you receive my protection, financial security, and freedom from fear. You'll live here, safe from Tyler and anyone else who might threaten you. After the child is born, we can arrange whatever custody agreement works best, or you can remain as part of this household. The choice is yours." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and yet terrifyingly real. Natalie's mind reeled. A child. He was asking her to have his child in exchange for safety. It sounded insane, transactional, like something from a different century. Yet as she looked at Julian Westmore, saw the seriousness in his expression and remembered Tyler's hands reaching for her, she understood the terrible logic. "This is crazy," she breathed. "Perhaps," Julian acknowledged. But is it crazier than going back to your apartment and waiting for Tyler to break down your door? Is it more insane than looking over your shoulder every day, wondering when he'll strike? I'm offering you a way out, Natalie. A permanent solution to an escalating problem. She stood, needing to move, to think. The study felt smaller suddenly, despite its generous proportions. Through the window, she could see city lights twinkling in the distance. So many lives being lived, so many choices being made. Her reflection in the glass looked small and scared, exactly how Tyler had always wanted her. I need time, she said finally, turning to face Julian. This is too much to decide tonight. He nodded slowly, setting his untouched glass aside. You have until tomorrow evening. But understand this, Natalie. Tyler won't wait. Men like him never do. You can stay here tonight regardless of your decision. You'll be safe. Rachel will show you to your room, provide anything you need. Sleep on it. In the morning, the world might look different. As if summoned, Rachel appeared at the door, her professional smile warm. This way, Miss Harper. Natalie followed, glancing back once at Julian Westmore. He stood by the window now, his silhouette dark against the glowing city, a man who'd appeared from nowhere to offer salvation with strings attached. The strangest part was that despite everything, despite the insanity of his proposal, she felt safer in this moment than she had in years. The question was whether safety was worth the price he was asking. Sunlight filtered through silk curtains, painting golden stripes across the largest bed Natalie had ever slept in. For a moment, suspended between sleep and waking, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back like a wave. Tyler's rage, Julian's intervention, the impossible proposition that still echoed in her mind. She sat up slowly, taking in the guest suite that had become her temporary sanctuary. The room was 3 times the size of her entire apartment, decorated in soft creams and blues that somehow felt both luxurious and calming. Her worn clothes from last night lay folded on a chair, but beside them hung a selection of garments in her size, casual yet clearly expensive. Someone had anticipated her needs before she even knew what they were. A gentle knock preceded Rachel's entrance, the assistant carrying a silver tray laden with breakfast. Fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like heaven, and coffee that promised to be better than anything Natalie had ever tasted. Good morning. Miss Harper, Rachel said, setting the tray on a side table with practiced efficiency. Mr. Westmore hopes you slept well. He's requested your presence in the garden at 10 if you're feeling up to it. No pressure, of course. Natalie glanced at the clock. 9:15. She had 45 minutes to prepare herself for a conversation that might change her entire life. Thank you, Rachel. Can I ask you something? Rachel paused at the door, her expression carefully neutral but not unkind. Of course. How long have you worked for Julian? 7 years, Rachel replied. He's a demanding employer, but a fair one. Whatever you're considering, Miss Harper, I can tell you this much. Julian Westmore keeps his promises. Always. The words offered comfort and warning in equal measure. After Rachel left, Natalie showered in a bathroom that felt like a spa, then dressed in dark jeans and a soft sweater from the selection provided. Everything fit perfectly, which should have felt invasive, but somehow felt thoughtful instead. Gardens and confessions. The garden stretched behind the mansion like something from a fairy tale. Terraced levels connected by stone steps, fountains providing gentle music, roses blooming despite the season. Julian stood near a marble bench, dressed more casually than last night in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to his elbows. He looked younger in the morning light, more approachable, though no less commanding. You came, he said, genuine relief crossing his features. I wasn't certain you would. I'm still here, aren't I? Natalie approached slowly, her hands tucked into her pockets. Though I have about 1,000 questions. Julian gestured to the bench, waiting until she sat before joining her, maintaining a respectful distance. Ask anything. You deserve complete transparency, she gathered her thoughts, watching a butterfly dance between the roses. Why me? You could have anyone. Models, socialites, women who understand your world. Why offer this to a waitress you found in a parking garage? His jaw tightened slightly, the only sign her question struck something deeper. Because you're real. Everyone in my circle wants something, plays games, wears masks so thick I can't see the person underneath. Last night, I saw someone fighting for her life with nothing but determination and car keys. That kind of strength, that authenticity is rarer than any diamond. That's a pretty speech, Natalie said quietly. But there's more, isn't there? Nobody makes this kind of offer without deeper reasons. Julian was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice carried weight she hadn't heard before, the burden of truth. My grandfather built this empire from nothing. My father expanded it into something powerful. Now it's mine, but there are conditions in the family trust. I must produce an heir by my 35th birthday or control passes to my cousin Vincent, a man who would destroy everything my family built for short-term profit. When's your birthday? Natalie asked, though she already sensed the answer wouldn't be comfortable. 8 months from now. The timeline made terrible sense suddenly. This wasn't just about legacy or business. This was about desperation wrapped in wealth and power. You've tried other ways? Relationships in my world are complicated, Julian admitted, a bitter edge creeping into his tone. Women want the lifestyle, the status, the money. When I suggested children, they wanted prenuptial agreements written by armies of lawyers, custody battles planned before conception. I realized I was looking in the wrong places, asking the wrong questions. Natalie turned to face him fully, studying the man who'd become her unexpected savior and potential jailer. So you decided to find someone desperate enough to say yes? His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and intense. I decided to find someone who needed help as much as I needed a solution. You think I'm taking advantage. Maybe I am. But consider what I'm offering, Natalie. Complete protection from Tyler, financial security beyond anything you've imagined, medical care, education if you want it, a future without fear. All I'm asking is 9 months and a chance at fatherhood I can't achieve any other way. You're asking for a child, she corrected, her voice catching slightly. A human being who didn't ask to be part of this arrangement. A child who will be loved, Julian said firmly. Who will have every advantage, every opportunity, every protection I can provide. I'm not asking you to disappear after birth. Stay. Be a mother if you choose. Leave with enough money to build any life you want if that's your preference. But this child will be cherished, not used. Cracks in the armor of phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Julian checked it, his expression darkening. Excuse me. I need to take this. He walked a few paces away, his voice too low to hear clearly, but his body language spoke volumes. Tension radiated from his shoulders, his free hand clenched into a fist. When he returned, the mask had slipped slightly, revealing frustration underneath. Problems? Natalie asked. Vincent, Julian said shortly. My cousin. He's challenging some business decisions, trying to position himself as the better option for board members already nervous about the succession timeline. The pressure is mounting. Something in his vulnerability made him more human, less untouchable. Natalie found herself asking, what happens if you don't meet the deadline? Beyond losing the company? Julian sat heavily on the bench, the weight of his world visible for just a moment. Everything my grandfather dreamed of, everything my father sacrificed for, gets torn apart by a man who only sees dollar signs. Thousands of employees lose stable jobs. Charitable foundations we fund get dissolved. And I become the Westmore who failed his legacy. That's a lot of pressure for one person, Natalie said softly. It's the price of this life, he replied, gesturing to the mansion, the gardens, the empire surrounding them. Nothing is free, not even for billionaires. Maybe especially not for us. They sat in comfortable silence, two people trapped by different circumstances, considering an arrangement that might free them both. A gardener worked in the distance, pruning roses with careful attention, oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening nearby. Can I see more of the house? Natalie asked suddenly. If I'm going to consider living here, I should know what I'm getting into. Julian's expression brightened, hope flickering in those storm-gray eyes. Of course. Let me show you everything. Behind closed doors, the tour revealed a home that balanced grandeur with unexpected warmth. A library that smelled of old books and wood polish. A music room with a grand piano Julian admitted he rarely played anymore. A home theater, a gym that put commercial fitness centers to shame. But it was the upper floors that surprised her most. This would be the nursery, Julian said, opening a door to a sun-filled room with windows overlooking the garden. "If you agree, if we do this." The space was currently empty but held such potential. Natalie could imagine it filled with toys and laughter, a crib by the window, childhood taking root in this palace of adulthood. The image both terrified and tempted her. "Tell me about your parents," she said, turning from the window. "Were they happy?" Julian's expression softened with memory. "They were partners in everything. My mother died when I was 15, cancer. My father never remarried, said she was his one great love. He worked himself to death trying to fill the emptiness, passed away 3 years ago. Sometimes I wonder if this empire is worth what it cost them." "I'm sorry," Natalie said, meaning it. "My parents are still around, barely. Dad drinks, Mom works constantly trying to keep things together. They don't understand why I stayed with Tyler as long as I did. Can't help me now that I've left. We're not close. So we're both alone," Julian observed. "Both trying to build something from broken pieces." The observation hung between them, true and sad. Natalie moved to the window, watching clouds drift across the sky. "If I did this, if I agreed, what would the actual arrangement look like? Would you expect us to be together, or would this be clinical?" She felt Julian move closer, his presence warm behind her. "I won't lie to you, Natalie. The traditional method would be preferable, but only with full consent and comfort on both sides. If you'd rather pursue medical intervention, we can arrange that. This arrangement requires trust, not coercion." Natalie's phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out and her blood ran cold. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 text message waiting. "I know you're at the Westmore estate. You can't hide forever. We need to talk. This isn't over. Tyler, he'd found her already." The security she'd felt in Julian's home evaporated like morning mist. Her hands shook as she showed Julian the message. His expression went from concern to cold fury in seconds. "How did he get this number?" "This address?" "I don't know," Natalie whispered, fear crawling up her spine. "He always finds a way, always." Julian took the phone gently from her trembling hands, his jaw set in determination. "Rachel!" he called, his voice carrying authority. The assistant appeared within seconds, efficient as always. Julian handed her the phone. "Contact security immediately. Full lockdown protocols. And get me Thomas Chen from cybersecurity. I want to know how this number was compromised and ensure it doesn't happen again." Rachel nodded and disappeared, leaving them alone in the would-be nursery. Julian turned to Natalie, his hands hovering near her shoulders before settling there with gentle pressure. "Listen to me carefully. Tyler Brooks cannot touch you here. This estate has security that governments would envy, but this proves my point, doesn't it? He won't stop. A restraining order is paper. Hope is not a strategy. You need real protection, the kind that only serious resources can provide." Natalie's mind raced, Tyler's words echoing in her head. He'd found her in less than 12 hours. How? What else did he know? The fear she'd been pushing down since last night roared back, demanding attention. "He's escalating," she said, her voice small. "Before, he just wanted me back. Now he's hunting me." "Then let me be your shield," Julian said, his voice intense but not demanding. "Not just for my sake or the company's sake, but because you deserve to live without fear. Say yes, Natalie. Let me protect you properly." She looked into his eyes, seeing genuine concern mixed with his own desperation. 2 people in impossible situations, reaching for each other across a divide of circumstance and class. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even friendship yet. But it was real. More real than anything she'd experienced in years. "I need 1 more night," she said finally. "To think, to process. But Julian, if I do this, I need promises. Real ones, not just pretty words." Relief flooded his features. "Name them." "The child is never used as leverage, never kept from me if I want involvement. I get to finish my degree if I choose. And if this doesn't work, if we can't make this arrangement function, I walk away with enough resources to truly start over somewhere Tyler can never find me." Julian didn't hesitate. "Agreed, all of it. I'll have contracts drawn up with every protection you need. This will be a partnership, Natalie, not a prison sentence." Another buzz from her phone, still in Rachel's possession somewhere in the house. They both tensed, the shadow of Tyler Brooks reaching even into this sanctuary. Natalie realized then that her decision was already made. She just needed the courage to voice it. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "Ask me again tomorrow morning and I'll give you my answer." Julian nodded, understanding written in his expression. "Tomorrow, then. In the meantime, you're safe here. I promise you that." As they left the nursery, Natalie glanced back once at the empty room filled with sunlight and possibility. In less than 24 hours, she'd gone from running for her life to considering bringing new life into the world. The universe had a strange sense of timing, but as they descended the stairs, passing portraits of Westmore ancestors who'd built this empire, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step into a story with no clear ending, only the hope that safety was worth the price of her freedom. Dawn broke over the Westmore estate with the promise of change. Natalie stood at the window of her guest suite, watching the sky transform from deep purple to soft pink, her reflection ghosting in the glass like a question waiting to be answered. She'd barely slept, her mind cycling through possibilities and consequences until exhaustion blurred into a strange clarity. The decision had crystallized somewhere around 3 in the morning, not from desperation, but from a pragmatic understanding of her reality. Tyler would never stop. Her resources were limited, and Julian Westmore, for all his wealth and demands, offered something rare in her experience: honesty about what he wanted and what he could give in return. A soft knock preceded Rachel's entrance with breakfast and a cream-colored envelope on the tray. "From Mr. Westmore," Rachel explained, her expression carefully neutral. "He's in the study when you're ready." Natalie opened the envelope after Rachel left, finding a single page of elegant handwriting instead of the legal documents she'd expected. "Natalie, whatever you decide today, I want you to know that meeting you has reminded me why this empire matters. Not for legacy or pride, but because it can provide safety for people who need it. You've already given me that gift of perspective regardless of your answer." Julian, the vulnerability in those words steadied her somehow. She dressed carefully in clothes that had appeared in her closet, selected by someone with excellent taste, and no need to ask her size. Navy dress, simple but elegant. Armor for a conversation that would reshape her life. The agreement, Julian stood when she entered the study, morning light streaming through tall windows behind him. He looked tired, lines around his eyes suggesting his night had been no more restful than hers. 2 cups of coffee sat on the desk alongside a leather portfolio that probably contained her future in legal terms. "Good morning," he said quietly, studying her face as if trying to read her decision before she spoke it. "Please sit." Natalie remained standing, needing to say this on her own terms. "I have conditions beyond what we discussed yesterday." Something flickered in Julian's expression, hope or relief or both. "Tell me." "I want to continue working, at least for a while. Maybe not at the restaurant, but something that keeps me connected to the real world. I won't be locked away like some prize in a tower." "Agreed," Julian said without hesitation. "In fact, I have several businesses that could use someone with your customer service experience. You choose where, when, and for how long. I want regular check-ins with a therapist, someone I choose paid for but private. This is going to be complicated emotionally, and I need professional support." "Already arranged," Julian replied, sliding a business card across the desk. 3 of the best therapists in the city. Interview all of them. Pick whoever you trust most. Complete confidentiality." Natalie picked up the card, surprised by his preparation. "You were that confident I'd say yes?" "I was that hopeful you'd have the courage to try," he corrected. "What else?" She took a breath, voicing the fear that had kept her awake. "If something happens to you, if this whole arrangement falls apart, I need guarantees that I'm protected. Not just financially, but legally. I won't be left vulnerable again." Julian moved around the desk, his expression serious. "The portfolio contains contracts guaranteeing you $5 million regardless of outcome, a trust fund for the child worth $20 million, and legal protections ensuring you can never be painted as anything less than a partner in this arrangement. Vincent or anyone else who tries to use this against you will face consequences that make lawsuits look gentle." The numbers made her dizzy. Wealth beyond comprehension offered as casually as someone might offer coffee. But it was the protective language that mattered, the understanding that her vulnerability needed shielding. "Then my answer is yes," Natalie said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll do this, Julian. We'll build this strange arrangement into something that works for both of us." The relief that washed over his face was profound, transforming him from stern billionaire into something more human. He extended his hand, formal and respectful. "Partners, then, in this arrangement and whatever comes after." She shook his hand, his grip warm and firm. The touch lasted a moment longer than necessary, both of them acknowledging the magnitude of what they'd just agreed to. When they separated, the air between them felt different, charged with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. Into the lion's den, 3 weeks later, Natalie found herself standing in front of a mirror in a bedroom that had become hers, adjusting a gown that cost more than 6 months of her old rent. Emerald silk that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, elegant without being ostentatious. Tonight was the Morrison Charity Gala, and Julian had asked her to attend as his companion. "It's time to introduce you to my world," he'd explained over breakfast. "Not as a secret, but as someone important in my life. The narrative we present matters, especially with Vincent circling." Rachel had spent the afternoon preparing her, explaining who would be present, which conversations to expect, how to navigate social waters where money flowed like champagne and every smile hid calculation. Natalie felt like an actor preparing for opening night. Except the audience was real and the stakes were her future. Julian appeared at her door, devastating in a custom tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. But his eyes, when they met hers, held warmth that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Are you ready for this?" "Absolutely not," Natalie admitted, smoothing nervous hands over the silk. "But I'm going anyway." His smile was genuine, appreciative. "That's the spirit that made me choose you." The gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, its ballroom transformed into something from a dream. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over hundreds of guests in designer gowns and sharp tuxedos. Waiters circulated with champagne and delicacies Natalie couldn't name. Everywhere she looked, wealth and power mingled with practiced ease. Julian's hand rested lightly on the small of her back as he guided her through introductions. Business moguls, philanthropists, politicians, all studying her with interest thinly veiled as politeness. She smiled, made small talk, and tried not to feel like an imposter in borrowed elegance. "So this is the mysterious woman who's captured Julian's attention," a voice said, smooth as expensive whiskey and twice as dangerous. Vincent Cross stood before them, handsome in a way that felt manufactured, his smile never reaching his calculating blue eyes. Everything about him screamed ambition dressed in charm, from his perfectly styled blonde hair to his Swiss watch that probably cost more than most cars. "Vincent," Julian said, his tone carefully neutral. "I didn't realize you'd be here. I'm on the charity board, cousin." "Surely you remember?" Vincent's gaze shifted to Natalie, assessing her like merchandise. "And you are?" "Natalie Harper," she replied, refusing to be intimidated despite her pounding heart. "It's nice to meet you." "Enchanting," Vincent said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "How did you and Julian meet?" "I'm always curious about my cousin's companions. They tend to be so temporary." The barb was subtle but clear. Julian's hand tightened slightly on her back, a warning or reassurance. Before either could respond, a commotion erupted near the ballroom entrance. Raised voices, security guards converging, and then a sight that turned Natalie's blood to ice. Tyler Brooks, disheveled and wild-eyed, pushed past a security guard, his gaze locked on Natalie with frightening intensity. When the past collides, everything happened in seconds that felt like hours. Tyler charged across the ballroom, dress shoes sliding on polished marble, his face twisted with rage and desperation. Guests scattered, champagne glasses hitting the floor in crystalline explosions. Natalie froze, every muscle locked by fear and disbelief. Julian moved like lightning, stepping between her and Tyler with the confidence of someone who'd faced down boardroom predators and street threats alike. His voice cut through the chaos, commanding and cold. "Security, remove this man immediately." But Tyler was beyond reason, beyond the social constraints that governed this glittering world. "You think you can steal her?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Hide her away in your mansion like some princess." "She's mine, Natalie! Tell him!" 4 security guards descended, professional and efficient, but Tyler fought like a cornered animal. His wild eyes found Natalie's over Julian's shoulder, and in them she saw the desperation of a man who'd lost control of his prize. "I loved you," Tyler screamed as guards wrestled him toward the exit. "Everything I did was because I loved you." The words echoed through the silent ballroom, hundreds of eyes watching the spectacle. Natalie felt exposed, her past laid bare before Julian's world. Shame and anger warred in her chest as Tyler was finally dragged from sight, his shouts fading into the hotel corridors. Julian turned to her immediately, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Around them, the crowd erupted into whispered conversations, phones appearing to capture and spread the drama. Vincent stood nearby, his expression unreadable but his interest clear. This scandal would fuel gossip for weeks. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice rang out, commanding attention despite the chaos. "I apologize for the disruption. The situation is handled, and I ask that you respect our privacy. Please, continue enjoying the evening." He guided Natalie toward a side exit, his body shielding her from curious stares and camera phones. They emerged into a private corridor, the ballroom noise muffled behind heavy doors. Natalie's legs finally gave out, and she sank onto a velvet bench, her hands shaking. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He ruined everything. Your reputation, your introduction of me to society, all of it." Julian knelt before her, his hands covering hers, grounding her spiraling thoughts. "Look at me, Natalie. Look at me." She forced her gaze to his, expecting anger or disappointment. Instead, she found fierce protectiveness and something deeper, something that made her breath catch. "You have nothing to apologize for," Julian said firmly. "Tyler's actions are his own, his choices, his violence. What I saw tonight was a desperate man who knows he's lost something precious and a strong woman who refused to cower. That's what people will remember, not his theatrics. But Vincent saw everything. He'll use this against you." "Let him try," Julian replied, steel in his voice. "I'm more concerned about you." "That took courage, facing him in front of everyone." Natalie laughed shakily. "I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it." He stood, offering his hand. "Come, we're leaving, but not in retreat." We walk out together, heads high, showing everyone that Tyler Brooks has no power here. The turning point, they returned to the ballroom long enough to make their exit. Julian's arm around her waist in clear claim and support. Natalie kept her spine straight, her expression calm, even as every instinct screamed to run. Guests parted like water, some offering sympathetic nods, others barely concealing their hunger for scandal. Vincent intercepted them at the main doors, his smile sharp. "Quite the evening, cousin. I'm sure the board will have questions about your judgment and associations." Julian's expression didn't change, but his voice carried warning. "The board will have questions about many things, Vincent, including certain financial irregularities in the subsidiaries you oversee. Shall we discuss that in front of everyone, or would you prefer privacy?" Vincent's smile faltered, confusion and concern flashing across his features. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you should speak with your accountant. I'm sure those conversations will be enlightening." Julian guided Natalie past his cousin without another glance, leaving Vincent standing uncertain in their wake. In the car, Natalie finally let herself process everything. What was that about? The financial irregularities? Julian's jaw was tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Something my investigators discovered 2 days ago. Vincent has been skimming from company accounts. Not much individually, but significant collectively. I was saving that information for the board meeting next month, but he forced my hand." "You were protecting me," Natalie said softly. "I was protecting us," Julian corrected, his gaze flicking to hers. "This arrangement, this partnership, it means something more than business terms and legal contracts. Tonight proved that. They drove in silence through city streets, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. When they arrived at the estate, Julian walked her to her door, neither ready to end the evening despite its chaos. "Thank you," Natalie said, her hand on the doorknob, "for standing with me, for not being embarrassed or angry." Julian stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her cheek with surprising tenderness. "Natalie, I could face 1,000 Tyler Brooks and 100 Vincents if it meant keeping you safe. That's what partners do." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither had named but both felt growing. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and Natalie's breath hitched. This wasn't part of the arrangement. This warmth spreading through her chest. This desire for his touch that had nothing to do with contracts or heirs. "Julian?" she whispered, uncertain what she wanted to say. He seemed to understand anyway. His forehead touched hers, intimate without demanding more. "We don't have to rush anything. This arrangement can become whatever we need it to be, as fast or slow as feels right." She nodded against him, her hands finding his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. "I'm starting to think this might be more than just an arrangement." "I know," he murmured. "I've known for a while now." They stood there, two people who'd come together through desperation and circumstance, discovering that sometimes the most unexpected arrangements could bloom into something real. Outside, the city hummed with life and gossip about the evening's scandal. Inside the estate, protected by walls and promises, something fragile and precious was beginning to grow. 3 months later, sunlight streamed through the nursery windows, now filled with a crib, toys, and soft colors. Natalie stood at the window, her hand resting on the small but visible curve of her belly, feeling the flutter of life within. Behind her, Julian's arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Tyler's trial starts next week," he said quietly. "The restraining order violations, the assault at the hotel, everything. He won't bother us again." "Good," Natalie replied, leaning back into his warmth. "I'm not afraid anymore." "And Vincent?" "Resigned from the company last month. The board was very interested in those financial irregularities once the full audit revealed the scope." Julian's hand covered hers on her belly. "We did it. We protected what matters." She turned in his arms, seeing not the commanding billionaire who'd rescued her in a parking garage, but the man who'd kept every promise, who'd stood beside her through scandal and fear, who'd somehow become her partner in every sense of the word. "This wasn't how I imagined my life going," Natalie admitted. "Better or worse?" Julian asked, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. She smiled, genuine and warm. "Different, complicated, but somehow exactly right." He kissed her then, tender and full of promise. Outside, the world continued turning, full of challenges and uncertainties. But inside the nursery, bathed in golden light, two people who'd started with an impossible arrangement had found something neither expected. They'd found each other. Found safety, found a future built on honesty and choice rather than fear and desperation. And in the end, that was worth more than any empire or legacy could ever be. The end.